Everybody, welcome back to the Heel Report, which is associated with Tar Heel 24/7 and CBS Sports. I am Tar Heel 24/7 publisher Andrew Jones. He is Tar Heel 24/7 basketball analyst and recruiting director for us, Mr. David Sisk, longtime college, AAU, and high school coach. David has tentacles everywhere in the sport. And what we're going to do here is talk some recruiting. An interesting week for UNC last week as a couple of targets committed elsewhere. We'll get into that for a few minutes. And as we're recording this, Maximo Adams is taking his official visit to North Carolina. He was in the Carolinas earlier this week, Friday and Saturday. His team played in Charlotte. We spoke to him Saturday night. We had someone there and talked to him Saturday night, got to watch him. He didn't play, but he got to talk to him and learn a little bit more about the situation. We'll have a little bit on that update. Before we talk about Maximo Adams, we want to go back into earlier in the week where a couple of players, Bryson Howard and Anthony Thompson, committed to other schools, which did not surprise us. David made it very clear on our message boards that for fans not to expect commitments. So we're going to get a little bit into that and offer a quick explanation about kind of how UNC views the class of 2026, how they're approaching it, and how things might move forward from here. So David, first of all, quick snapshot on the two commitments early in the week that didn't go Carolina's way. And from there, we will morph into what the intent and approach for the class of 2026 is for UNC.
Well, we can get Anthony Thompson over pretty quickly. He's from Ohio. He stayed home, went to Ohio State. So, it was between Ohio State and Indiana, most of us thought, and he was a kid from Big Ten country, and he stayed, like I said, in state. It was very important. It's a big signing for Jake Diebler. And very important for them. So, they put everything in that bag. So when you look there, I don't really look at it as one that they missed on. When you go after a kid and he stays home, you're talking about getting kids away from their state schools. And sometimes that can be tough. Bryson Howard, on the other hand, that was a guy that North Carolina fans were hoping for. And the visit went well. But your kind of hope was that after he visited North Carolina, there might be a quick commitment, but obviously that didn't happen. And then as you go away from that, then Duke really comes into play. And, it doesn't make North Carolina fans happy when they lose a recruit, but especially when you lose a good one to Duke. But I do think there's some things at play here. You and I talked before we came on here, and we've gotten some explanations from those close to the North Carolina program. And I think that you've got the way the two programs, North Carolina and Duke, are approaching things. There's a difference there because I feel North Carolina feels like this is what you spoke about with me, that North Carolina feels like that they could have quite a few players back next year. Duke are bringing in a lot of these freshmen, and North Carolina is not really in a situation where they can go out and get 4 or 5 because they feel like they're going to have a lot back, where Duke's still operating in this one-and-done cycle. You can see how many guys that they had that went out last year, and they're going to do the same thing with Boozer and some of the others this year. So they're going to have more openings. So the thing that you're really talking to the freshmen are, hey, we know you're a really good player, but we can't guarantee you a starting position if we have the players come back that we think that we're going to have. And, North Carolina is bringing in guys now out of the transfer portal that they don't feel like are going to be one-and-done transfers that are going to be in the program 2 years or longer. So they're hoping for a little bit more longevity and more chemistry there. So from what we understand, Maximo Adams understands this, whereas Bryson Howard may not have as much.
And maybe different. They would be different freshmen as well, and that's part of what our understanding is. Carolina believes that it can retain most of the roster, and one of the things that a very well placed source has told us, and people should understand where Carolina is financially with roster building, but they'll have the resources to keep the roster if they want to keep the entire roster. So let's say everybody on the roster overperforms what expectations are. They should, if they want, to be able to keep all those kids. And I think that's what some of the recruits know. And back in the old days, you would bring in Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, and Jeff McGinnis to a returning national championship team that had everybody, basically almost everybody back. That would happen back in the old days because the processes were different and the paths were longer to get to the league than they are now, or certainly longer even to play a ton of minutes than they are now at the college level. The thing that we're understanding about Maximo Adams is that he has a lot of options, but one of them would be to come into a situation with a lot of experienced players back, and he knows that he would be in a process. Not a lot of these kids want to be in a process. We watched A.J. DeBanson the other night. It looked like his process is just get me in the league now, guys. I want to go right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. And BYU's going to have to work with that, and he'll help them a whole lot more, and he's going to hurt them. But Maximo Adams isn't that kind of player. And the other thing, too, that people need to understand, and this is very well sourced as well, Carolina's not going to overpay for guys. Now, we had heard some stuff about how much they would have been willing to bring in Bryson Howard, but they're not going to overpay. So maybe they would have offered market value, but Duke came in and offered more. Plus, Duke has that immediate playing time to sell, and also a history of a willingness to play a lot of freshmen. The other thing too, David, and you can test this, you know this as well, that if they could get a Caleb Wilson type, they would bring him in and obviously play him right away. He's starting now, may well be the best player. They will not inhibit a great freshman coming in and doing what a great freshman is supposed to do. So I think that's kind of interesting where the class is right now. So like you're saying, they may only bring in one or two kids, especially depending on how things go. If they think they're going to return a lot of players, and that's not a bad way to build a roster these days in college basketball. They brought in two big-time freshmen last year, and they're both gone. One's in the NBA, the other one's playing for somebody else. And the big-time freshman they brought in the year before that's playing for somebody else now too. So maybe this is the right way for someone like Hubert to build a program. Maybe it's better for him to bring in more experienced kids that he might find more fitting for how he wants to do things.
I interviewed Evan Maekawa a couple of weeks ago, and one thing that he said, the most important thing you could do now is the returners. So having a guy in the program that's back for that second or third year, and when you can do that with a transfer, that's really important, because not only are you getting a guy in his second or third year in a program who might be 21, 22 years old instead of 19, that's a big deal. So you need to be old anyway. And, but just the familiarity with the program and the development. So those are big things, like you said. If you look at North Carolina, if you get, let's say, we've heard as many as they think they may get 10 back. So, like I said, there's no reason to go out for them, or there's no way they can justify it to go out and get 3 or 4 players in the class. Now, if they do that, then I would think 1 or 2 out of the portal to most. You talk maybe 1 high school kid, 2 in the portal, and that they're going to trust that they can get done. Here's your saving grace now with the portal. And I've tried to tell this to people. Even if you strike out some with high schoolers, the portal's there. So it's not like it used to be where that's your only option. So if you let's say you have more guys leave than what you had intended, well, you've got the portal to back it up, and you can still go get guys. So even if there's some miscalculation there, you've got a safety net, on the other end.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and we're explaining kind of where things are right now. Some people might say, well, you're making excuses for no, we're not. We're kind of outlining where things are and what the approach is.
We're reporting some things we thought about that we've learned that were reinforced to us, like you say.
We thought about
inside people. So we really kind of know where things are at right now.
Well, 100%. And we kind of suspected about a little change in approach in the portal with Hubert. And I think the addition of Jim Tanner, the general manager, is enormous here, because he can take care of a lot of things that Hubert doesn't have to. And it is smart, in my book, if maybe the path moving forward, or the blueprint rather moving forward, is bring in transfers who have multiple years of eligibility remaining.
Yeah.
So if you look at the players they brought in, and we have one game, an exhibition game with sample size so far, but does it look like Henry Vesar is headed to the NBA next year? Maybe not. Does it look like anybody else other than Caleb Wilson is? And Seth Trimble obviously is a senior. Luka, once he's cleared, he could be a guy that leaves and is off either to a bigger deal in Europe or something here. We don't know. We have to see him play. But a lot of the other guys are going to have an option to play in college again. Stevenson, Powell, all those guys, Kyan Evans. So if they get them for a second year, that's class building. That's program building. And these days, a second year with a core group of players is a lot. Look at Florida. They brought a lot of guys back. It'll be very interesting to see what they're like this season. So I think that that's a very, very interesting approach. And honestly, you don't want to spend too much on a guy that comes in and isn't going to play as much as he thinks he should. And the money he gets kind of screws things up on your current roster as well. And I think that's something else to consider because, like in the pros now, kids look at how much guys make. Van Allen Lubin left because of money, because someone else was brought in that had lesser stats, and his people are like, wait a second, you're paying him that much more than Van. And so Ven's like, losing playing time. I'm not getting paid what that guy's getting paid. I'm out of here, essentially. So I think that that's a very, very intelligent approach, and it shows that Carolina has learned, and they are combing through the landscape on how everything transpires, and they're learning from it and identifying what they're most comfortable with, and that's the way they're going to go. And I think this is a positive. The Jim Tanner effect is clearly in effect, so to speak, and I think that's a huge positive for Hubert Davis in this program.
Yeah, and you've said, and we don't have the answer to this, you've asked me in the past, you wonder how many of these guys they've signed on to 2-year contracts. So, that's something worth considering, going forward to kind of reinforce that guys are here for that second year. And like you say, they don't want one and done transfers, to sign these guys in for 2 years. Now, one thing too, what if the NCAA, there's talk about the NCAA granting a 5th year of eligibility, which I think it's going to end up going to anyway, because it's hard for these individuals to graduate in 4. Especially when they're on the road so much and playing. I know so much of it's online courses and those things, but if you're a college athlete, you can't take 18-hour quarters. It's just impossible. You've got a bunch of 9 hours, 12 hours, whatever the minimum is, and then you take summer classes, and that's really the only way you can maneuver it. So unless you're really, really, unless your IQ's up in the upper 1 percentile or whatever, like Andrews was, but you've really got to look at maybe the 5th year eligibility option comes open by the NCAA, and there's a lot of talk. So if that happens, Seth Trimble's a Chapel Hill businessman. He's in the Chamber of Commerce now. So, does that allow him? Does he think about coming back for another year? So you never know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I actually thought the 5th year was going to pass this past year, but a bunch of other stuff with the what's the bill that passed, or the thing that passed, the House settlement. That was the sticking point, and that's why a lot of things didn't occur this past spring with the NCAA. That was the big deal that was keeping everything else from happening. I had multiple conversations with Mac Brown in the last couple of years when he was head football coach at Carolina, and he said 100% of 5th years coming. And one of the reasons is because most students are in college for 5 years, so athletes should get a 5th year as well. So it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a great thing too. And boy, if you can go out and grab a kid that's played 2 years and you get him for 3, that's program building in the modern era. And Carolina has a lot to sell with that, as far as a guy like Kyan Evans. At some point, he's going to play a regular season game here, I guess in a week or so, at North Carolina. I can't wait to ask him, so what's it like running out on the court and playing a real game here as opposed to Colorado State? These kids get a rise out of that. Caleb Wilson the other night, I talked to him outside the locker room in Salt Lake City, and he said that was the most fun he's ever had. The most fun he's ever had playing basketball in his life was the other night, and there were about 9,000 people in the building, in a 20,000-seat building. And there was some good noise, but I'm thinking, man, Caleb, wait till you play in a regular game. And so Carolina has a lot of those things to offer, and kids are going to know that. They're going to know that Caleb said that. They're going to know that whatever Kyan says, he says. So there's an awful lot for UNC to sell in addition, and I do think that if you sort of model your program moving forward of being that kind of program, kids will see you that way. So that means if you have a lot of spots that are going to open and kids are playing somewhere else and they're having a good year and they're thinking about transferring, they might have you in mind, similar to the recruiting process where they're being recruited heavily as a junior in high school and they know they still have another year and a half before they can get to college. I think that's very interesting, and that might be something that's kind of fun to track moving forward, or certainly once kids get on the radar, once they formally hit the portal. How long have you been thinking North Carolina? We hadn't asked these kids that before. It's always, when did Carolina reach out to you? But maybe now, if you develop that and other players know it, they might have an eye on you for a year before hitting the portal and then ended up at North Carolina.
Yeah, so I think right now I'm glad North Carolina is ahead of the curve on this. So the recruiting philosophy maybe going forward is not reactionary, but instead they're thinking ahead and getting ahead of the game, because if you're trying to play catch up in the college basketball world now and you're trying to see what the trends are, it can be trouble. The coaches in all sports that are really successful are the ones that think ahead. I've mentioned Lane Kiffin a couple of times. Lane Kiffin talked about with a revenue sharing and contracts. He said, we started that a year ago because we knew that was what we were going to go to. So we went ahead and started early just so we would be ready. And I think you see your most successful programs, doing that.
I think we're starting to see North Carolina with an ironclad blueprint. It doesn't mean they're not going to bring in 3 or 4 freshmen, but it depends on the freshmen and depends on what else. Very quickly before we end this, Maximo Adams' official visit, Brandon P. talked to him Saturday night in Charlotte. He was actually in Huntersville, and he has an official visit Sunday. He's there right now. I guess the official visit might still be going on as we record this. We talked to somebody very close to the situation a little while ago, said the visit's going very, very well. He is a high priority, and he's worth market value. That he's someone that they would very much want to bring in, and he would kind of fit with the blueprint that we're talking about.
Yeah, and the thing that we've heard is that they've told him, they've sat down and told him basically the roster outlook, just like we've explained it. And look, there's going to be a bunch of players back, and I think from what we've heard, he's more receptive to that, and he understands it. And you've got to understand with him, he's a late bloomer to this process anyway, because of injuries, because of different things, personal situations that he's had. He's really well known early in his high school career. With all those things that happened, he kind of fell off. He really didn't get back on track till last spring when he changed EYBL organizations to the Vegas Prospects. So he really became he really jumped up, climbed the rankings. He was a double-double. He was one of the leading scorers in EYBL. So, like I said, was one of the top players, and he's got a very attractive offer list going in. We've talked about it. Michigan State, USC, some of those schools, Texas, are some of the ones that are on top for him. But the belief was going in that North Carolina could really kind of move ahead if he really saw what they had to offer and he was good with that, and they could really knock this visit out of the park. You got to remember now, to visit so much, it's different now than some guy taking him out and him having a good time bowling with the boys or something like that on a trip. It's negotiations, and that's a lot of it. And also our vision for you, where you can be at going ahead, how we can develop you, how we're going to use you. So if that's something he's comfortable with and he hears what he likes, and those around him, his inner circle, his family, his agent, and all these kids' agents, if it's something that they can work out and they really like, then that kind of moves you ahead. There's a lot more to it now. There's a lot of layers on the onions you peel back, but from everything we've heard, things are going well.
Absolutely. And let me just clarify, I'm not saying they're not recruiting a ton of high school kids in various classes, just kind of the way things work out right now. There's not a lot of space there, and that's kind of how they view this, but they will recruit lots of high school kids. That's obvious from moving forward. He's David. I'm AJ, and we appreciate you stopping by.